Knowing who not to draft can be just as important as knowing who you do want to draft. We're going to give you 6 wide receivers we're not touching this draft season. First, let me remind you, this is the perfect time to get a membership to flockfantasy.com/endgame. If you use our promo code, you still get 30% off before draft season gets underway, to where you can find access to all of our draft rankings, plus bonus materials like articles, extra videos, and of course, you get a chance to join our Discord and be first to join our mock drafts, which we do live every week with you. And you can join actual in-game leagues, compete with us and our amazing community. All of that, if you go to flockfantasy.com/endgame, there's so much more. Check it out right now. All right, Chris, I know you love wide receivers, but maybe not these guys in general. Who's the first one?
I really think DK Metcalf is one of the most mispriced wide receivers in fantasy football this year. When you look at it last year, I admit he was better than I thought he would be last year, but he still wasn't that good. 13.3 fantasy points per game, wide receiver 24. But nothing has changed this year as far as his ADP goes. He's still a guy you got to draft either late second, early third as a borderline wide receiver 1. And I don't get it because he wasn't even that good last year when everything kind of broke right. I mean, Geno Smith played out of his mind last year, and it was just him and Tyler Lockett basically getting every single target here. They had no pass-catching running back like Zach Charbonnet that they have now. They didn't draft the best rookie wide receiver in this class, Jackson Smith-Njigba. I mean, he's going to have less of a target share this year, and you're still banking on Geno Smith continuing to play out of his mind and not regressing to the previous form of Geno Smith that basically he was his entire NFL career prior to last year. So for me, DK Metcalf just does not give you the upside that people think he does. Still being drafted like an elite wide receiver. And look, I love the guy. I love the player. He's a great player, but the situation is just terrible this year. What's going to probably be 3 wide receivers out there a lot, not a good target share. And we got to, again, assume, are we going to get the great Geno Smith again, or is he going to revert back? So DK Metcalf just horribly mispriced. I don't understand why he's going so early in drafts.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking that the fact they were the first team to take a wide receiver when the top in the draft didn't change his ADP much. That's a little bit puzzling. I'm also confused as to why, a wide receiver who is over 30 and now just joined one of the lowest passing volume teams in the league hasn't hurt his ADP either. In fact, we're seeing a climb because DeAndre Hopkins finally signed somewhere. And that somewhere was Tennessee. You might not be surprised to find out that they had the 3rd lowest pass attempts in the NFL last year. It's just not a pass-friendly offense. Is that going to change because DeAndre Hopkins is there now? No, it won't. This is not how things work, right? This is, in fact, you've seen the meme there. Tennessee is the place where aging wide receivers kind of go to die. And let me remind you, if you're not aware of it, Julio Jones, remember how amazing he was in Atlanta until he went to Tennessee? Okay, and then there's guys like Andre Johnson, Randy Moss. You might remember that he went to Tennessee. This is just what they do. They get these guys who think that they can get, the best years out of them and extend them, and it doesn't happen. They seem to somehow target these wide receivers that are past their prime. And look, DeAndre Hopkins was still good last year. I'm not saying that he's like Andre Johnson in the final year of his career or Julio Jones, but he's not a spring chicken, and he has missed some time with injuries lately, and he's catching passes from Ryan Tannehill, and they're not going to throw the ball that much because they still got Derrick Henry. I mean, nothing points to the fact that we should really feel confident that DeAndre Hopkins can even be a fantasy wide receiver too. And the worst case is much worse. So I'm not spending up on him to hope that he somehow in Tennessee maintains what he has done the last few years. All right, who's another wide receiver that you'd just rather be without?
I've been talking about Jerry Jeudy, and I keep kind of taking the easy way out and saying, I think he'll be okay this year. I think he's fine. But you know what? He's not fine. He's bad. He was very bad last year. And somehow he's gotten this stigma of being an elite route runner when he hasn't been an elite route runner any year of his NFL career. And every video where I talk about this or whatever, I put up the picture of his route tree, which is horrible. And I still get comments from people saying, you're wrong. Jerry Jeudy is an elite route runner. Okay, fine. You can call me wrong. I'm literally putting the proof on the screen and showing you he's not. He does some things well. He runs some routes well. But people keep waiting for this Jerry Jeudy, breakout season, this incredible wide receiver. He's not that type of player. He's a guy who's better off being a complement to an alpha number one wide receiver. And what I don't get about his ADP this year, Jerry Jeudy being drafted as the wide receiver 20. When is the next Denver Broncos wide receiver being drafted? It's Courtland Sutton at like 96 or something crazy like that. Not wide receiver 96, but like pick 96. Like, you're telling me that Jerry Jeudy is so much better than Courtland Sutton that there should be a 6-round difference between these guys? Like, come on, that's crazy to me. In order for Jerry Jeudy to pay off this ADP, you need a couple of things to happen. Number one, Jerry Jeudy has to take a massive fourth-year leap, which we don't see very often from guys. We pretty much know who these wide receivers are by this point as far as route runners and technicians go. Number two, you need Russell Wilson to become prime Russell Wilson. Are you really feeling good about that? I mean, maybe you could say, well, Sean Payton can save him. You better hope so, because if he can't, then Jerry Jeudy is not going to come close to paying off this ADP. This guy's being drafted over better wide receivers with more upside because of potential and hype. I'm done. I'm tired of saying I'm on the fence with Jerry Jeudy. No, I'm done. I'm not drafting him. The path for him being great is small, and the path for him being a bust is big. I'm going to just play the percentages here, and I'm going to avoid Jerry Jeudy.
It's weird because it's the same thing. I feel like every time in our mock drafts where he's there, and like, all right, sometimes I'll just grab Jerry Jeudy. He's my third receiver, and I never get excited about it. I never come out feeling good about that pick. And I kind of getting that same feeling, unfortunately, with Michael Pittman. I think Michael Pittman is actually a really good receiver. And if you look at reception perception, there's a couple things he doesn't do well, but for the most part, there's a lot of green. He's actually a good receiver. And, I don't think it's the player himself. I've always liked Pittman, is why I draft him. I just don't think the situation is any better than last year, really. Now, the offense should be better. And, obviously a new coach, new quarterback. Things will be different, but I don't think they'll be better for him specifically. Now, part of that just stems from the fact that I'm not sold on Anthony Richardson as a passer. I think he'll help the offense, but I really think partly because they need to play to his strengths and partly to protect him and, not turn the ball over, this is just going to be a really run-heavy team. I mean, they have Jonathan Taylor, obviously one of the best running backs in the game, and they have who could be one of the best running quarterbacks in the game. They're just not going to want to sit back and pass it that much. So despite the fact Pittman really doesn't have a lot of competition for targets, his target share should be huge. I worry about how efficient he'll be able to be, and also if there's just going to be enough to go around for him, because I just don't see them passing the ball enough to support him as a weekly wide receiver too. And he's being drafted kind of in the 70s right now. I mean, maybe he profiles as a wide receiver 3 for fantasy. He's fine there, but again, we keep saying this. I don't want fine, right? I don't want a guy who could be okay. Maybe if everything breaks right, gets a 1,000-yard season. That's not going to win you your league. I would rather shoot for upside. I'd rather go somewhere else. Look, not the player, it's more the situation. But again, I just feel like I could do more with a pick in that area than a guy who is just going to be on what probably will be a not so dynamic pass offense. Now, you have a guy in mind who is on a pretty good offense, but there's other issues.
Yeah, you talk about not wanting the guy who's just fine, and Kadarius Toney, we know, can be more than fine. The problem is he's never fine, as in health-wise. He is never fine. This guy is never healthy. Training camp, the first day of training camp, he's returning a kick, the first kick of training camp, and he already tweaks his knee? Are you kidding me? What is happening with Kadarius Toney? A kick return against air the first day of training camp, and he's already hurt. Look, I don't like the injury-prone labels on guys. I don't think that's fair. But there are just some guys who, for whatever reason, either can't suck it up, these injuries, or just really are injury-prone. I'm not sure. I'm not trying to call Kadarius Toney out here, but this is a guy who is always banged up. And even last year when he wasn't banged up, he's barely on the field. He was barely used. Like, does he not know the playbook? I don't understand it at all. I kind of like Kadarius Toney early in the offseason. I saw the potential, with this wide receiver group, the talent, the upside. But none of that matters if he's not on the field, and I'm done with this guy. I'm done with it. I don't care. I don't care if he's ready week 1. I don't care if he's back week 4. I do not care. This guy will never be on any of my fantasy teams ever again. Not worth the headache. Anybody else can have him. They can deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so tempting to take a Chiefs receiver because obvious reasons, but you kind of have to play and be on the field in order to be productive. Now, JuJu Smith-Schuster, you might remember, was on Kansas City, and he played almost every week last year, and he still really didn't do anything for your fantasy team. I mean, he didn't, despite catching balls from the best quarterback in the league right now and being on the best offense in the NFL. I think it's pretty clear that he is what he is, and he's still a low A-dot receiver, only 7.3 yards average depth of target, despite being in Kansas City, which is not known to be a conservative pass offense. That's just what he is. He's just a big-bodied slot guy who will roll out in the middle of the field, and if nothing else is open, he'll soak up a few targets and not do a whole lot with them. He'll catch a few touchdowns here and there. Now, again, mind you, he was not a standout player last year for fantasy, despite being on Kansas City. This year, he's in New England. That's right. Went from Pat Mahomes to Mac Jones. Went from Andy Reid to Bill Belichick. So I think we can imagine what this is going to do for his fantasy value, which is absolutely nothing. He will have no value, and yet he's still being drafted almost in the top 100. I looked in PPR leagues, he's almost a top 100 overall pick. There are so many other players that you could get, and at least they have some upside. But man, JuJu, just forget about the fact that he was really good a few years ago in Pittsburgh. That was a long time ago. You know what he is right now. It's completely unexciting, unhelpful to your team. Just pass over him, forget the name, go with somebody else. Not Kadarius Toney, but go with somebody else and at least try to shoot for the moon and get some upside. Those are the wide receivers we're staying away from. And these are the running backs we're also not going to touch.